In this lesson, we are going to look at conditions and decisions because they are intertwined. If you want to make a decision, well, you have to have a condition. So before we get into that, let me briefly go over how I'm going to organize the code in this lesson and the following lessons. I want you to be able to find these files easily in the code download. So I'm going to create a folder that is correlating to the chapter and lesson. So this is the second chapter and the third lesson. So this folder is going to be called 2.3, and then all of the files for this lesson are going to be inside of this folder. And what you see on screen is going to be what is in the files. So the file name, the file contents, everything is going to be what you see on screen. So we are going to be working with conditions and decisions. So I'm just going to call this conditions. We could use index.php, and that would actually be easier as far as the browser is concerned. But I want you to be able to look at the file name and see that, oh yes, this is where we did conditions and decisions. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do in this file is create a PHP block. But notice that I have not closed that block. And this is perfectly legal, and it's actually something that we should do. If we have a PHP file that has nothing but PHP code, nothing else, then this is fine. We should do this. If we have HTML or anything else, then we should probably close our code block, just so that you're aware. Okay, so a condition. What is a condition in programming? Well, it's a lot like a condition in real life. Let's just go back to school, and we are sitting in basic math, and we need to compare two numbers. So we're going to compare the number 1, and we're going to use the less than comparison, and we're going to say that 1 is less than 3. That is, of course, true, right? That is a true statement. So in programming, this is essentially what we do. We compare two or more values, and we get a result. It's true or it's false. So we are essentially testing something and then working with the result of that test. So here we have a variable called result, and we are comparing 1 is less than 3. That is, of course, true. So the value of true is being assigned to result, and we could echo that out. So let's just do that, and we'll see what we have. So let's go to our browser. We'll go to 2.3 and conditions.php, and we have the number 1. Why do we have the number 1? That should be true, right? Well, here's the thing. If you're not really familiar with computer science, at the very basic level of a computer, you have a transistor. Inside of a CPU, it's nothing but transistors and silicon and all of that stuff. But a transistor is either on or it's off. There is no other state that a transistor can be in. That is the absolute basis of computers. Something is on or something is off. So whenever you talk about bits and bytes and megabytes and things like that, a bit has one of two values. It's either 0 or it's 1. 0 would be off. That is typically false. 1 is on, and that is typically true. So the result that we have here says 1 in the browser, but that's representative of true. So let's do this. We're going to echo result equals true. Now, notice what I've done here. I've used two equal signs. This is the comparison operator for equality. We are comparing result with the value of true. Now, also notice that true is not $true or anything like that. It's just plain true, and it's all lowercase. So if we go back to the browser and we refresh the page, we still see the value of 1, because what are we doing? We are echoing the result of comparing our result variable with the value of true, and we're seeing if they are equal. So if we have a keyword or a special word called true, it goes without saying that we have a special word called false. So if we go back to the browser and refresh, we don't see anything at all. Because if something is false, then PHP isn't going to output anything. It's just not going to be there. So this is the basis of making decisions. We have some kind of comparison, and we're going to use that in our decision. So when it comes to comparing values, we can check for less than, we can check for greater than, we can also do less than or equal to and greater than or equal to by just adding an equal sign after. We can compare the equality of two values with two equal signs. Now, once again, I cannot stress this enough. If you are comparing two values and you want to check if they are equal, you use two equal signs, not one. If you use one equal sign, you are assigning something. You're taking what's on the right-hand side and assigning that to what's on the left-hand side. That is not what you want to do if you are comparing two values together. You want two equal signs. So if we have the ability to compare if two values are equal, then we also have the ability to check if two values are unequal. For that, we have an exclamation point. You might hear other people say bang or not, and that is followed by an equal sign. So we have a not equal, we have equal, equal, we have greater than or equal, greater than or equal. And we could use this with more than just numbers and what we call Boolean values. Boolean values are true and false. So now let's do this. Let's create two variables that are going to be for the first name and last name. So we'll say first underscore name, which, by the way, when it comes to naming variables, there's many different styles that we can choose from. Traditionally, variables in PHP have an underscore between the different words. So we have two words in this variable name. We have first and name. So we would separate that with an underscore. Now, in other frameworks like Laravel and Symfony, the convention is to not use underscores, but instead use camel casing, where the first word begins with a lowercase letter, and then every other word after that begins with an uppercase letter. We have camel humps, so that's called camel casing. The important thing is to be consistent. If you are in a project and you start using underscore variables, then continue to do that. If you use camel case variables, continue to do that as well. Don't mix and match your styles. Pick a style and stick with it throughout that entire project. It's also important to use the style that your particular framework is going to use, because chances are you're going to use a framework. If you don't, well, more power to you. But if you use something like Laravel or CodeIgniter, or there's many other frameworks to choose from, look at their style guidelines and follow them. It just makes your code easier to read for you as well as anybody else that is going to be looking at your code. Now, for this course, I'm going to try to use underscores. I typically like to use camel casing, but traditionally in PHP, variables use an underscore, so I'm going to try to do that. So we have a first name variable, we have a last name variable of McPeak, and we are going to make a comparison here. So we're going to check if our first name is equal to Jeremy. So notice what I'm doing here. I have an if statement. That's what this is. If, and then we have our condition inside of a pair of parentheses. And then we have a pair of curly braces. So if first name is equal to Jeremy, then this code inside of these curly braces are going to execute. So let's just echo, and we'll say that the condition is true. So let's go to the browser. Let's refresh the page, and the condition is true. That is natural because our first name variable contains Jeremy, and we are comparing that with Jeremy. But let's do this. Let's change the J in our comparison to a lowercase j. Now let's go back, let's refresh, and we get nothing because this condition is false. And because that condition is false, this entire if statement is false. But let's say that, well, we want something to happen anyway. So we can have an else statement. So if first name is equal to Jeremy with a lowercase j, then echo the condition is true. else echo the condition is false. So now we will have at least something on the screen. The condition is false. So there's one other thing here. Notice that I did change this to a lowercase j. And as far as programming is concerned, there is a difference between an uppercase j and a lowercase j. Even though for us humans, we might look at that and say that, yes, they're equal. Of course they're equal. But they aren't. They are two different strings because one has a different value than the other. So we have this ability to make a decision. If something is true, then we are going to echo this. Otherwise, we're going to echo this. But we also have the ability to have multiple comparisons within a single condition. So let's say that we want to check if first name is equal to Jeremy with an uppercase J, and the last name is equal to a string that has McPeak with uppercase M, lowercase c, uppercase p, and so on and so forth. So now let's look at what we have in the browser. We have true. Okay, so let's look at this. We have two conditions here. We have first name is equal to Jeremy with an uppercase J. Then we have two ampersand signs. This means and. So if we were reading this and translating this into English, if first name is equal to Jeremy with an uppercase J and last name is equal to McPeak with those uppercase characters, then the condition is true. And we saw that it was true in the browser. And we can have as many comparisons as we need inside of a single condition. However, the more comparisons we have, the more complex our condition becomes, and the more we have to really think about it. So try to keep your comparisons as small as possible. It just makes your life a whole lot easier. So we've talked about the and. Let's do the or. So the or operator is two pipes together. We say first name is equal to Jeremy or last name is equal to McPeak. So in the case of or, we have our condition and we have two comparisons in that condition. If one of these is true, then the entire condition is true. So let's change this again. Let's change the uppercase j to a lowercase j so that our first comparison is going to be false. But since we have an or condition, we are still going to see that our condition is true. Because even though our first comparison is false, our second comparison is true. We are saying is if first name is equal to Jeremy with a lowercase j or last name is equal to McPeak. So the condition is still true. However, if we change this to an and, both of these comparisons have to be true in order for the entire comparison or the entire condition to be true. I'll tell you what, it is hard to say comparison and condition in the same sentence and get it right. So I just had to throw that out there. Okay, we have a condition here, but let's say that we want to do more than just this comparison or this condition. We want a second condition in case if this one fails. So let's do this. We're going to say if first name is equal to Jeremy with a lowercase j, last name is equal to McPeak, else if, then we have another comparison. And in this case, we're going to say if first name is equal to Jeremy with an uppercase J and last name is equal to McPeak, then we're going to say the second condition is true. And let's also change our first so that it says the first condition is true. And then we're going to have an else where we say the condition is false. Okay, so let's read this, because whenever you come across multiple if and else ifs, it's easier to just read it so that you can get an understanding of to what's going on. So if first name is equal to Jeremy with a lowercase j, or if last name is equal to McPeak, then we are going to say the first condition is true. However, if this condition is false, then it's going to fall down to the next else if. If first name is equal to Jeremy with an uppercase J and last name is equal to McPeak, then the second condition is going to be true, and that's what we will see. Now, if both of these conditions are false, then we will see the condition is false. So go ahead and think about what you're going to see on screen. Well, you're going to see that the first condition is true. That's because we have this OR operator here. First name does not equal Jeremy with an lowercase j, but last name does equal McPeak. So let's change this. Let's make McPeak have a lowercase p. Now, whenever we refresh the page, we're going to see that the second condition is true, because the first condition is all false. Both comparisons are false, so that one's false. The second condition, first name is equal to Jeremy and last name is equal to McPeak, well, that one's true, so that's what we see. But if we make this fail, let's change this to a lowercase j, or no, let's not do that. Let's use the not equal. So if first name is not equal to Jeremy and last name is equal to McPeak, then we should see this, but that's not the case. Instead, we're going to see that the condition is false. I guess that's not right. The conditions are false. So let's get that right. The conditions are false. And so at the heart of it, it's very simple. We make a comparison, and then we make a decision based upon that comparison. However, we can make this as complex as we want or need to. We can have a condition that has multiple comparisons, but in doing so, we also make our code a little bit difficult to follow. But regardless, this is something that is going to take a little bit of time to get a hold of, because there are different comparisons that you can do. The inclusion of and or just adds to the complexity of it. So this is something that you need to practice. And if all else fails, just read it. Read it as the code is written. It translates to English very easily, and you'll get a better understanding of what's going on when you do so.